As a young girl growing up, though, what was the pathway that led you to becoming enamoured with music? Was there a lot of music in your house growing up?
There was. My dad played guitars. He played electric guitar and lap steel. And he had a bunch of songbooks, like Willie Nelson and James Taylor and Paul Simon and Neil Diamond. And we used to get all the neighborhood kids to come over, and we'd sit on the big bed in my parents' bedroom, and my dad would play guitar and we'd all sing. So from a really young age, we kind of had a folk thing going on. Before I really even knew what that was. And then when I was 9, there were 2 ladies named Jan Bojikas and Jan Jensen, who lived in my neighborhood. And one of them loaned me a violin and the other one gave me lessons. So, so I got the singing thing and the violin thing as a young girl.
So the violin came first. When did the attention start to swing towards guitar for you?
Well, I was always interested in it, and there's pictures of me as a toddler, holding my aunt's guitar. But I didn't really take a lesson on guitar until I was in college. So I had sort of borrowed my dad's guitar, and I knew a couple of chords, from growing up around the songbooks. I certainly went in there and poked around, but I didn't really get a formal lesson until I was in college. And even then I only took, maybe 3 lessons and then just taught myself. So.
Now, I guess it would be impossible to have a chat with you and not have the subject of Dave Carter come up, of course.
That's right.
Yeah. Can you remember the first time you met Dave?
Oh, absolutely. I talk about it all the time. Yeah, I had just moved to Portland, Oregon, from Berkeley, California, and was dating another guy named Dave, who was a songwriter. And he took me to a songwriter showcase at a place called the Buffalo Gap. And we were scheduled to play. And we were number 6 in the lineup, I think. And so we played, and it was just one after the other, people playing 2 songs in a row. And at the end of the night, that's when Dave Carter came in. He apparently, I learned later, had been teaching piano to little kids, and so he couldn't get there any earlier. But he showed up at the end of the night, and he was the closing act. And I still remember the 3 songs that he sang that night, and he was performing with a young woman named Susan Martin, who was playing guitar and singing along. And, pretty much from the first lyric out of his mouth, I was hooked. The first song I heard him sing was called Gunmetal Eyes, and it starts, his mama was a Cherokee princess, or so it was said. And I had just come from the University of California, Berkeley, where I was studying English with a focus on Native American women's literature. And so I was all excited to see somebody talking about a Cherokee princess. And then just as the lyrics unfolded, I found more and more resonance. And I just, I fell in love with the music instantly and happened to meet him on the way out the door that night. So some good luck for me there.
What about the first time you sat down to make music together? Was there a musical chemistry there straight away?
Well, in the beginning, we had a band. So there was a 5-piece band, and I was just playing violin. Susan Martin was in the band, and then we had an accordion player, a stand-up bass player, and then a woman who could just play all sorts of things, like a flute or another guitar or mandolin. She did all sorts of percussion, whatever. And so I was just a small part of that. But what happened was those people all had lives, and they all had, they had kids or they were getting married, and they got busy. And eventually Dave got invited to play a backyard birthday party, I think it was. And nobody else could make it but me. And that's when we sat down to rehearse as a duo for the first time. And we realized instantly that we were kind of done with the band at that point. We're like, oh, this works. We don't need them for anything. And so it wasn't very long at all until we were exclusively a duo after that.
And you made your first record together in your kitchen. What are your distinct memories of that recording?
What I remember about that is just leaving the equipment set up it's funny, the kitchen, really the room was like a big shoebox. And the half that had linoleum for a floor was the kitchen, and the carpeted half was the living room. But there was no separating wall or anything. It was just a big room. And the recording equipment was set up kind of on the line, between the linoleum and the carpet. And we would work on it in shifts. We took forever to make that first record. And but like somebody would sit down and just kind of record themselves singing a part over and over and over again. And then, maybe later, Dave would come over and he would record himself playing a mandolin or whatever. But we just did it really slowly, really painstakingly. It took us quite a while actually to get it done. But I absolutely remember the process, the feel, the light. I remember everything about it. Yeah. And
a lot of the charm of that record is probably the feel that comes across from being just a relaxed home recording.
Yeah. It's very bare bones. It's very true, I think. And I love it. I still love it.
Now, an early break you both had was touring with Joan Baez. That kind of validation from such a legendary artist must have been a great shot of confidence for you both.
It really was. And it was really unexpected. When we found out that she had started performing Dave's song, The Mountain, in her shows, we had no idea how she even knew who we were. We didn't know who'd given her the music. Like, we didn't do it. It's not like we pitched her the song and we're like, I hope we get Joan to sing this, We had nothing to do with it. But our fans they told us, they said, hey, did you know, like, Joan is singing one of your songs? And so eventually her management called us and said, she wants to meet you. And they said they arranged for us to attend a show of hers in Columbia, Missouri, and then to stay overnight in the hotel with the band and then meet her the next day. And it was fascinating. What Joan said about Dave's writing is that she heard something in it that reminded her of Bob Dylan, a certain kind of, she called it a genius, but also when she says genius, it also refers to a kind of accessibility, where she just felt like the songs were relatable and accessible to her, that she really felt like she could interpret them well. And so, it was interesting for me because I saw that there was a lot of focus on the songwriter, on Dave. And I was like, oh, okay, they're just bringing me along for the ride, that part of the duo. All right, that's fine, because really my mission was to make sure Dave's songs got heard because I believed in them so much and I was happy to do whatever that took, But as it turned out in those shows, I was the primary soloist. I had no idea that was going to happen. And there's at least one song that I remember where Joan and I actually swapped verses, and it was such a huge validation. She's really a wonderful artist and a wonderful human. Just so down to earth and so heartful. And she really took such great care of us both. It was such an honor to work with her.
Now, I believe Dave was quite encouraging of you coming more to the fore as a singer. Is that right?
Yeah, over the course of our albums, you'll see that in the beginning, it's all Dave singing, and I basically sing harmony. And then with Tanglewood Tree, I think I have 3 songs on that one, maybe. And then by the time we get to Drum Hat Buddha, it's 50-50. So what he used to say in interviews is that what he really wanted to do, his first love was the songwriting, not the performing, just the songwriting. And so he used to tell interviewers that he wanted to go live in a trailer in the desert somewhere and just write songs and then send me out to sing them. And so in a way, being that he died in 2002, and I took on the task of singing his songs, I suppose, in a way, he fished his wish,
his wish, yeah.
Yeah. And, I try to imagine him like in a heavenly trailer somewhere in some desert up in the sky. I don't know.
Yeah, have you ever pondered what direction do you think his music and songwriting would have taken if he was still with us today?
Well, Dave, at the time of his death, was just beginning a gender transition. And so I have wondered, we did have a plan for what would happen on the other side of that. We didn't talk about it much at the time because in 2002, people didn't. Everything was very hush-hush. It was very secretive, even though we lived in Portland, Oregon, which was very forward-thinking and pretty much anything goes, He was still, he didn't advertise it, and only very few people knew about it. Our plan had been to switch from a duo to an all-girl psychedelic country band.
Wow.
That we were going to call it the Butterfly Conservatory, and Dave would just be in. I don't even know what name he would have used. He hadn't gotten that far, but it would be us and our bandmates, and it would be a slightly different direction. I'm kind of sorry we didn't get to do that.
Would have been wonderful.
Yeah, I think so.
Of course, you've continued to fly the flag of Dave's music and songs through the years. There's also been some previously unreleased recordings that have been put out there. Has that all been exhausted now in terms of unreleased recordings? Is there anything else in the vaults?
There are a few more things in the vaults. Signature Sounds, which is the label that released Tanglewood Tree and Drum Hat Buddha, has a couple of outtakes from the sessions for those albums that still haven't seen the light of day but are release worthy. And I have a couple of bins full of live recordings and interviews, and I need to go through those and see what else is in there. I'm looking in particular for a couple of songs that I can't quite remember, and or some really rare ones that we just we never got around to recording. So there's still some surprises in there. There's still a few things, but for the most part, all the best of what was left has been released. Yeah.
So after Dave passed, did it take some time for you to get your head around what to do with the next phase of your career?
Yes and no. On the day that he died, when I visited him in the hospital, I felt like I sort of felt like I was touched by a mission, which actually had been my mission all along, which was to make sure that people heard Dave Carter's work, and heard his songs and appreciated, the genius behind them. But I felt like when I saw him, that was just kind of, fortified, emboldened, strengthened. All of a sudden I knew this is what I'll do. What I didn't know was really how to do it, because I had been his accompanist. I had never been a solo performer, not before I met him or anything like that. I didn't mostly play guitar on the songs. I mostly just played violin and mandolin. And I had no experience as a front person, telling the stories and doing all of that. So my heart said, this is your mission. You're going to sing the songs of Dave Carter, and make sure everybody hears them. But, on the other side of it, I had a steep learning curve and quite a few face plants on my way to achieving my goal.
You've done a wonderful job through the years keeping the music of Dave alive and his songs out there. But has there at any point reached a moment in time where you've decided for yourself that it's a wonderful thing that you've been doing, but is there a time where you've got to start making a mark with your own music?
I never got into this to do my own music. I'm one of those people that's really good in a support role. Mm-hmm. I'm a really good cheerleader, but I will say that not only professionally but personally, it did become necessary for me to sort of ease up my grip on the legacy work. It really did interfere actually with my romantic life. partly because I was romantic with people who were musicians who played these songs with me, and they were just like, oh, we can't hear that story anymore about that guy, you know? And I realized, wow, I've really gotten myself into a pickle here because I have this mission where I'm carrying on this person's legacy, and it's affecting my, you know, my life, my social life, my love life. But also, yeah, I was getting fatigued, you know, after about, it took a while, after about 10 years of doing it, I remember feeling like, okay, let's button this up. And then I didn't, you know, it would be another 4 years till 2014 when I got invited to be part of a project called Real Women, Real Songs. That's when I started writing songs. That project was 21 women from all across the United States writing a song a week together and posting them on the internet for people to see. It was organized by a friend of mine named Carrie Cooper. And that's what got me writing. So, but, you know, it did take a long time for me to sort of let go of that Dave Carter thing. I just didn't see how to transition myself out of that work into songwriting when my own songwriting I didn't really know how to make that happen. But when I got involved in Real Women, Real Songs, the deadline pressure, the community, the prompts, that made it click for me. So.
And when you started writing your own songs, were there any specific influences from Dave's approach to songwriting that had an influence on the way you went about the craft yourself?
You know, I think there was, probably subconsciously. Like, I think many of the songs, I probably changed the chorus each time the chorus comes around, which is something that he would do. You know, like the chorus is never the same in a Dave Carter song from one to the next. I think I adopted that. I did try to keep in mind his advice that you really don't need a bunch of fancy chords to write a great song. You know, you can keep it simple.
Yep.
And certainly both of us share a love of language, you know, adult words, you know, muscular words, athletic words, words that have a lot of power behind them, not the easy words necessarily. And so I definitely put that to work as well in my own songwriting. And I'm sure there's other ways that I was influenced too that I'm not even aware of, you know, just having sung the song for so long.
So have you worked yourself into a consistent process of songwriting now, or is it still something that can differ slightly from song to song?
I don't have a consistent process about it. I'm very emotion driven. And again, I find that when I'm in a situation where I have a container or a deadline or some form of accountability, that's when I do my best work. I think when I'm just left to my own devices and with a slight touch of maybe attention deficit disorder, I have trouble focusing because there's just too many options, you know. But if someone says, write a song about X, then I'm like, oh, okay, that's helpful to me, you know. And if they add, you know, do it by Friday, that's even better because then I have a little box that I can work in. But I do get overwhelmed by all the options, you know, all the directions a song can go. And I haven't, I would say that I'm still, you know, even though I made an album of my own songs, I feel like I'm still a rookie songwriter. I still have a lot to learn, which is what you could say about music generally, you know, and that's what's so lovely about it is you're just always learning, you know. It's so great.
And just getting to that album, it must have been a wonderful feeling to finally have an album of your own songs out there.
It was life-changing, I have to say, John. After all those years of being a mouthpiece for someone else's legacy, you know, and then finally making my own record and saying things the way that I wanted to say them, and calling up all my influences, all my history, all my you know, things that I love about the music, as opposed to doing it the way that Dave would do it. You know what I mean? And trying to be true to someone else's vision. It was in some ways it was blistering to me. I felt like I shed a bunch of skin, and it was not always pleasant getting down to the thing that I really wanted to say and the way I really wanted to say it. But in the end, it was liberating, and it really was life-changing. And then going around on tour, singing my own songs just felt completely different. I felt whole for the first time.
Was there a sense of relief at all to be finally out there with your own songs after championing the songs of somebody else for so many years?
Absolutely. Yeah.
You crowdfunded that album with Kickstarter with an incredible response. That must have also been heartening to know that so many people were willing to put their money up front for what you were working on.
Yeah, I was pretty stunned by the response. I was very hesitant to use Kickstarter. I was very hesitant to ask. I wasn't sure I was worthy of it. I just was like, oh, I don't want them to do that. I don't want to have to figure out how. And I remember making the video for the Kickstarter, and it took me 3 days, and I don't even think I ate the whole time. I was so nervous and so just struggling to figure out what my story was. What is the story behind this album? Who is Tracy Grammer on her own without Dave Carter? It was part of this whole, I keep thinking of blistering, this whole transformative experience of doing my own songs and telling my own story. But in the end, I released that campaign, and the album was funded in 34 hours. And
wow.
So insane. It was like $25,000 raised in 34 hours. I was blown away.
That's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah. So that told me, okay, it must really be time for this, or maybe a little past time. And people are excited. So that was a huge boost. That made me feel great.
I've spoken to a few people through the years who have crowdfunded an album for the first time, and they often mention a feeling of pressure, a feeling of not wanting to disappoint the people that have shown such faith in them. Did you feel a little bit of that too?
Yeah. I think that went into, you try to make the best record you can, and you're trying to fulfill all of the, there's so many tiers and so many rewards, and you're trying to do that in a timely way as well. But the one thing is that the people who funded my album were kind of familiar with the songs already, because not only had I started to perform them, but they were part of this Real Women, Real Songs project that I had done. Mm-hmm. And so they had seen them in their very earliest phases. And so that was exciting for me, because I was like, oh, they think it goes like that, but now, wait till I produce it, wait till I really add all the bells and whistles and flesh it out, because it takes a little while to get to know a song. You don't always know it the minute you write it. You have to work with it a while. So, there was a little pressure, but it was more an excited pressure, like, wait till they hear this. I was so excited. I knew I had a great band, so that helped too. I had a smart band. Yeah.
Are you very self-critical of your songwriting? Do you find yourself constantly looking for editing opportunities?
Well, I don't know if it's self-critical. I just want to be accurate. I just want to be true. And that's really the measuring stick. It's not, is it good? I don't know how to express that, but I'm looking for the truth. So if I'm critical about it, that would only be because something about it rings false, but not really like, in any other way. I am sort of perfectionist a little bit, but I'm totally aware that, songs are just snapshots. It's just a moment in time, and they're just songs. Like, if you don't love that one, we'll just make another one.
Now, like so many artists, you've been doing some online performances in recent times. Tell us about Jim Henry, who you work with there, and who's an accompanist with you, and what makes him a perfect musical ally for you.
Yeah, so Jim Henry, I met him the year after Dave Carter died, and he's just an all around multi-instrumentalist, singer-songwriter, producer. He can do it all. And we started playing in 2003, And he's just been my steady ever since. I never really played with anyone else. There was a guy named Donnie Wright that I played with a little bit right after Dave died. But then once I was touring nationally and Jim Henry was based on the East Coast, I was still in Oregon at the time. Made more sense to work with him. So, he's really well known out here. Mainly for his sideman work and his production work, but he's also toured with Mary Chapin Carpenter. You know, he's done some pretty big tours, Paula Cole, and he works with other people like Eliza Gilkison and can't think of the Weepies he's worked with. So, but he gets around. But he and I have toured Europe, and we've gone around the country, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of shows. And what he did during the pandemic was set up a broadcast studio in his basement. First it was in the studio, then he moved it to the basement, and he's outfitted it with really great gear, really great cameras and lights. So it ends up being a really beautiful experience for us because it's such a quality, setup. And our fans have been loving it, and they say that it's one of the better looking and sounding live streams that are happening. So that makes us happy. And it's just great to work with him. Really great to work with him. And he's also just one of my best friends. So I feel very lucky.
Yeah. Now, did I see somewhere you were working on a memoir?
Yeah. I have been working on this memoir since 2007. And theoretically, it's about my time with Dave Carter. But, as I progress through the changes of my life, I see that there's other stories that I want to tell as well. And so I'm actually coming to the end of a first draft of it. But I think I'm going to make some pretty radical changes in the second round. So I have been working on this a long time, and I joined a Pioneer Valley Writers Workshop here in Massachusetts. And this year, actually, it was perfect timing because of the pandemic. And all of us had been working on our memoirs really hardcore, after years of neglect. Mm-hmm. So I have no idea when it'll come out. I don't have a title for it or anything like that. But essentially, it's going to be it's going to address my relationship with Dave and the complicated grief around Dave's passing. Nobody knew that he was transgendered or, working on a transition at the time of his death. But we certainly had to contend with that because we had been in a romantic relationship and we were struggling with it, frankly, behind the scenes. And so by the time, he died, a week later, I was at the Falcon Ridge Folk Festival, and there's 8,000 or 10,000 people in the audience standing up and cheering for me as I take the stage in a sort of memorial performance for Dave. It's the first time I'll take the stage without him. And I just I had this realization that they're kind of mourning a fairy tale. Like they all think that we're in love and, everything's like a certain way, that it's a traditional relationship. And what they don't know is how we've been struggling behind the scenes and what was done to us. And so initially, when I got the idea to write the memoir, it was to come clean about that, because I just felt so weird accepting everybody's condolences when it was what they thought, but it wasn't what they thought. Yeah. And I just felt like I needed to set the record straight. And so, but there's more to it, now that I've lived more, just the whole journey of becoming your own artist, on the other side of that, when you're kind of a legacy mouthpiece and then you go on to learn to sing your own song, it's really quite a transformation. So it's shifting, but I love it and I'm really enjoying working on it. So.
And just one last thing before I let you go, Tracy. New songs and new recordings. Anything on the horizon there?
Well, I just got invited for another round of this Real Women, Real Songs project. The originator, Carrie Cooper, is rebooting that program. I'll be writing a song a week with 20 other women, and we'll probably get an album out of that, which will be great. So I'm really excited because the container I needed has presented itself. Otherwise, I've mainly been working on the memoir. And I think, my cat was very sick for a couple of months. And so I haven't played much music, quite frankly. I released a couple of singles this year, but, a couple of Townes Van Zandt covers, but I didn't do an album, and I didn't write any songs. So it was kind of a down and strange year. Yeah. But I think I can just feel the energy is going to shift with this project and with everything else that's going on here in the States. And so I'm really looking forward to that, to a period of kind of a harvest after all of it. Yeah.
Well, we look forward to the product of that harvest, whenever it may be. Hey, Tracy, thanks so much for your time. I know it's been a tough week for you, so I do appreciate you taking some time out for a chat today. Thank you for all the wonderful music through the years.
Well, thank you, John. It's really lovely to talk with you.
Lovely to talk to you too, and hopefully maybe we'll see you down here in Australia one day.
That's right. That would be so fun. I'd love it.
Awesome. Thanks again, Tracy. All the best.
Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.